The real question is, Carl, why do you always make us late? For those who
Oh,
are
the
unaware,
irony. Oh, the irony. That's funny. That's
yeah, I
funny.
left Carl waiting for way too long because my
I'm
audio is all messed
honestly,
up.
honestly though, given the day and the date, it's a wonder that we're as coherent as we are.
Yes, yes. And generous friends can be a dangerous thing on New Year's. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Uh, all in one piece, somewhat miraculously. Uh, Taught my wife how to play poker. That might be a
Oh.
mistake.
Mm.
Uh, anyway, so Carl, how have you been? It's been what, 2 weeks since we've spoken at least live on air.
Yeah, I mean, Christmas was wonderful. New Year's was wonderful. It's just a great season. A lot of time with family and friends, and so yeah, doing well. All things considered.
I guess to be a professional podcaster, you and I have done another recording. We both appeared on Pete's show not too long ago
Yeah.
to do a sort of retrospective on the life and work of Z-Man. So if you're interested, check that out. It's sobering, but it was good. It was honestly pretty funny in some parts, as
Yeah.
Z-Man was. Uh, Obviously, as well, I put out my compilation of every time I spoke to him live on air. So if you're interested in getting some context for that, the episode we did with Pete is is probably the best place to start. But yeah, man, 2025 has been it's been quite a year. I found an interesting graphic. It was going on Twitter a while back. Of course, I opened Twitter and it's just dozens of people berating me for being late to my own stream, which fair enough, I guess. But it was sort of interesting in that it tracked on kind of a bar graph the heat of different stories over time. So I'll pull it up, but I thought it would be interesting to go through it. And yes, FBI informant, it is true. He is. What the heck? All right, sorry, that's weird. There's some sort of traffic altercation going on outside my house. Uh, anyway, so to kind of track how these stories developed over time. All right, so you can see, right, the height of this, line is basically how often it's been searched, and you can see, the conversation sort of develop over
Mm.
time. Uh, some interesting things there, right? I kind of forgotten that the big fires happened. Uh, you know, Less of a relevant story now. Just God smiting California.
Unless
Greenland,
you haven't
sort of
been
an
able to rebuild.
yeah. Well, that's a them problem. Now, if I were in a fire, it'd be horrible. Top line news. I'd be e-begging constantly. But over there, people I don't like, not a problem. The Greenland thing, somewhat similar inauguration. All of these are kind of I'm not joking. There's actually a fight going on in front of my house.
That's wild.
Uh, yeah, I live in a very normal suburban neighborhood. So sorry if you hear if you hear
Is it
horns blaring.
okay? So now I have to ask:
Yeah,
is it what we would expect?
partially. Uh, huh. Well, it is a 14-year-old clapped out Honda Accord.
Mm,
I'll provide no additional information. Sorry, I
yeah,
know this is poor
yeah.
podcasting. It's just a bizarre incident, like literally within my own view.
I kind of
Uh,
expected a Nissan Altima, but same.
Me too. Me too, actually. So, moving up in the world. Uh, no, in
I
all
was being
seriousness.
tailgated a couple nights ago. My daughter was went to a very innocuous like middle school kids holiday party hosted by a bunch of parents, and like I'm usually one of the parents that volunteers to kind of chaperone these kinds of things, but I
Mhm.
didn't have to, and we know the parents and trust them, and it was this very nice innocuous thing. Anyway, I went and I picked her up, and within 3 blocks, who was aggressively tailgating me but someone, a quote unquote person in a clapped out 15-year-old Nissan Altima. So
Dude,
yeah, it was nice.
I had a fascinating conversation. I had sort of had a small graduating class of like 30, roughly 50-50 male female. So the guys
Mm.
got pretty close. And, just an informal gathering of about 10 of us, kind of catching up. And it was, as you expected, married, babies, all that kind of stuff. But there were two people who were really interesting to talk
That's
to.
wonderful, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Normal, I mean, I guess if the people who fell off the face of the earth and, turning tricks on a
Sure.
street corner probably don't want to show up. But still,
No.
uh, two guys really interesting to talk to. One, local police department. For all of the reasons having a contact to the local police department can be fun and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, a guy who works, in kind of middle management at Enterprise, right? Did rentals.
Oh my
And
goodness.
having the two of them together was really funny
Oh, that's
because
delightful.
one, car stereotypes are completely correct.
Yes.
His rental company had to drop the entire Dodge Charger lineup for exactly the reason you
Oh
think.
my goodness.
And then also, sort of as a joke, I was trying not to court controversy, brought up the Nissan stereotype in oblique terms. And both of them, they were sitting next to each other, like, oh, 100%. The cop was like, I see a
Yeah.
gray Nissan Altima on a spare tire. I'm
Yep.
stopping them. I know they're up to something.
Yep. That's delightful.
And what was especially interesting about the two of them talking is I found out that there is a pattern. Right? This is a scheme, sort of a Ocean's 11, where you rent a car to go commit a crime. Now the
Yes.
problem is when you do this, you rent a car with your driver's license,
Yes.
which
It's
means
very complex concept.
it is really no additional layer of security than just using your actual car. It leads to the same information.
Correct.
It is like
Correct.
exactly like half a step. And so I was talking to these guys. They're like, "Oh yeah, we see each other all the time." Because I go in and I'm like, "Hey," and he's like, "Oh, good to see you
that
again."
is hilarious, dude. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah,
And
I have to.
the
Can I add some? I'll
of
let
course,
you finish. I'll let you finish.
no. And the highlight was the two of them talking about this sort of incident they'd both been involved in together. Where the guy who works at the rental company was like, "Yeah, this guy comes in. He says, you know what? I hit a deer. Use the insurance that I bought to cover it." He's like, "Okay, whatever. It's a normal form." And then, like 2 or 3 days later, another guy comes in looking for a rental. He's like, "Yeah, I was just minding my own business at home, and then there's a police chase going through my neighborhood,
Oh my
and they
goodness.
hit my car. So now my car's in the shop." And the guy's like, "Oh, that's weird." And he was like, "Yeah, it was like a blue Chrysler 200. He's like, "Wait a minute. We just got a guy who had a Chrysler 200 come in with damage, that could have matched up to this guy, what he was describing."
Oh my goodness.
And found out that basically they were like 90% of the way through processing insurance claim for a car involved in a police chase. So point is, rental cars, they're not giving them out to our strongest soldiers. I'll leave that out.
So a former colleague of mine who I he was basically Antifa adjacent. So I certainly don't. I hope good things for him and his family, and hope that he steers himself in a less retarded direction. Oh, and here's the best part. His Antifa adjacency is all because he's a sports fan. I mean, I'm dead serious. It's sports in bio as the stereotype. Anyhow, the reason I bring this up, the reason I invoke this when you're talking about rental cars, is that there are these services out there where you can loan your personal car out for, the idea being it's just sitting there, so like get some cash out of it. Well, he lives in a city that has become infamous for anarcho tyranny. By the way, a subject that our mutual friend Astral and I discussed at length yesterday morning, and the episode will be coming out on Monday. Anyhow, so anyway, he stopped doing this because his car kept being used in crimes. And when you have an app that governs all this stuff, there is a great deal more F-wordery which can take place that anonymizes the actual user of the car versus them going in person for a rental car. So he's found spent casings in his car. He's found drugs. Someone cooked meth in the back of one of his cars, so he had to like write it off as a salvage. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hilarious. And he was like, "I can't believe this is happening," and I'm like, "You put this up. You put two of your cars up to be able to be used by anyone, you know, who just puts information into an app." And so, yeah, you get $50, but a crackhead uses your car for a crime spree, and you live in a city that is infamous for this, and you're surprised that it's affecting you personally. Because what you're supposed to do is say, "Oh, that would only affect those poor whites down there who I disdain." And so, anyway, couldn't happen to a nicer person. I just saw a hummingbird outside my window. It's January 1st.
This is again horrible podcasting to just be talking about things happening off camera.
I mean,
so
like,
to speak.
seriously, I saw them a week ago and I was like, I've never seen a hummingbird. Yes, it has been a very mild year, but like we just got below freezing at night after Christmas and there's hummingbirds zipping around. Anyway, thrilling radio.
Yeah, thrilling radio. So to get back to your point, I'm guessing he was using like Turo or another app like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So yeah, that's sort of an interesting thing. Because if you remember, Turo was used in a series. I guess this would have been was this this year or last year? Early crimes, like very dramatic ones. Both the Trump Tower bombing,
Oh
right,
yeah.
which I consider to be the most suspicious event I have never heard anything else about. Uh, and then also that attack in New Orleans, right? Both rented off Turo. Now, look, like, Turo's convenient to use, and in a big city, it's, probably better than getting a rental car, like a Ryder truck or something. That was weird. Do you remember that incident in the Trump Tower bombing with the Tesla Cybertruck?
Yeah, the Cybertruck and the what did the guy use? A Desert Eagle?
Yeah,
50
yeah.
cal? Yeah.
That was sure weird.
Yeah,
No
it's
one
totally
killed.
logical that that kind of a guy would use a meme gun of that type. Like an SF operator using a Desert Eagle uh, doesn't really check out.
Especially, I mean,
But
not to be grim, but only on himself.
only on himself, yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
and as we know, the first rule of Timeline Earth is never kill, only yourself.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
no, but in all seriousness, that's a really weird one, because I don't know if it's on in this graph, but the anti-Elon violence at the beginning of the year,
Mm,
which was kind of presaged a lot of the other riots and anti-ICE violence, and then just political assassinations we saw later. It was sort of an interesting incitement. One of the things that came out was that a lot of this was just being funded by like the leftist NGO network,
yeah.
right? Open Society Foundation and others. Uh, so I mean, I think if we're making predictions for 2026, it's that things will continue to get more violent. I mean, I don't think that's a good thing, but like this is a observable trend line. That one particular incident is very, very weird. Uh, Karl, in our circles, I'm sure you have access to, some guys who know some things.
Hmm.
And the number one thing I got from my contacts, guys who didn't know him, but, were either at the same team before or after, who had friends in common, their main takeaway was that's a guy who could have done a lot more. Like the sort of amateurish, I think it was like a pressure cooker bomb, or something like relatively simple.
Yeah, one of those
Uh,
Middle Eastern things that you could do with black powder and just trash. Yeah.
yeah, and they were really surprised because they were basically saying like this is a very ineffectual,
Yeah.
like a very ineffectual
Device.
attack. Like he
Yeah.
blew up
Yeah.
a Tesla Cybertruck in front of the lobby of
And
Trump
killed
Tower, and
himself. Yeah.
yeah, just very odd. And I don't, ironically, I don't have a smoking gun. I don't know where that goes, why that happened. But that is one of several just bizarre incidences that it feels like it has completely dropped off the face of the earth and there has been no additional context.
Oh yeah, and there won't be. Yeah, I mean it's the I think one of these funny things is you still see these conspiracy theory obsessed people, and I use that in scare quotes because you know what I mean. Like it's the people that genuinely believe that everything is some vast conspiracy, but at the same time they believe like the truth will come out, and it's like no, like it's kind of like the black pill and the litany against fear. You have to pass through the fear, and leave it behind you, and only you will remain, right? You have to do that with the black pill so that you understand reality and accept the situation, and then say it is time to move forward based on this orientation and have a positive outlook, understanding that I'm not going to be able to salvage this system, for example. But you have to do the same thing with a lot of these conspiracies, which is I'm never going to know. And so, there's things that if you can actually influence it, and if you have information that sharing it will actually do something, that's great. But if you don't, if it's one of these things that's so compartmentalized that the chances of like reality being exposed are, infinitesimal, like you kind of have to go, that's weird anyway, and just move on.
Oh, right, because it's like otherwise it'll drive you crazy. There's quite
Yes.
simply nothing to be done, which is depressing, but yeah, and that's sort of bizarre. Like there really have been, and we'll see this on here, there are others, multiple stories that have just dropped off the face of the earth, after being kind of, you know, like brought in. Uh, the other ones on here, you see the kind of, huge peak and then slow, kind of pathetic, uh, like bleed out of, Doge relevance.
Yeah.
To me, like, and this happened, I guess, around Thanksgiving, but when Doge died, any hope for the administration died as well for
Oh
me.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's the one where it's like, okay, you fought Leviathan and you lost. Like there were, obviously, on this program and others, I've made my criticisms well known, so I'm not gonna, restate them here. But that's the moment where it's like, okay, like you guys lost. Like, sorry, you didn't, well, lost, I guess. You were unable to do what you said you wanted to. And I think that, especially if we expect some sort of, reversal in the midterms, I think it is very likely that Elon Musk goes to jail. He really, really angered people.
Oh
And
yeah.
additionally, I think it's curious to think like how much of the, knowing what we do about the funding for the anti-Tesla violence, like how much of that was organic and how much of that was basically like we're going to hurt you for doing this or at least trying to. Uh so again, like I'm not the biggest Elon fan in the world, but he might have made a very, very bad move. And I think you're already seeing it with the way that, Tesla is trending as a company. Now, interestingly enough, uh there have been rumors that SpaceX is going to IPO and it's going to, hit, I think it'd be the first, IPO above a trillion. I think rumors are saying Musk is aiming for like 1.3. So maybe, Tesla will, sort of pass by the wayside and SpaceX is really the thing that matters to him. And, it seems as if, Teal, Palantir, and, Musk and his buddies have gotten very involved in the security state. So maybe the
Hmm.
answer is simply to make yourself too, you know, to make
Too
yourself
big
too
to fail.
indispensable.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, that said, we have seen these people over and over again cut off their nose to spite their face. So who knows? But I'd be curious to see where that develops. But yeah, the Doge one is sort of that one where it's like, regardless of anything else, regardless of the, the foreign policy disasters, regardless of all the other very real criticisms, at least that was something which could have measurably made things better. And at this point, it's a complete and abject failure. It is gone.
Yep.
Everything has been absorbed back in. It went from 2 trillion in savings to 1 to I think it ended up at like 130 billion if you squint your eyes, which look is a monumental amount of money, but not on the scale of USG.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing about Doge is that it was a parallel institution that they controlled within the government, which is absolutely what is required to take on the deep state. So I mean, it's pretty amusing, frankly, that the way that it that this worked out, and the obvious, you know, swamp operatives that are steering his administration, Susie Wiles for one, right? Like it seems like such low hanging fruit, and then you remember that he was reelected. He was allowed to come back. He was allowed to survive these things because of the coalition backing him, and all we would ever expect to play out is a struggle for this control, right? The control of, who's gonna ascend to the top, and there'll be successes within these factions, and like for example, all the stuff with the Somalis, right? Like they're an incredibly small, highly visible, highly hostile, useless population, and they do nothing but take, and they're completely a tool for the enemies of his factions, like the collection of factions that are backing him. And so the easiest way to get a win is to say, we're going to get rid of these people. But it's literally like 60,000 people. Is it a staggering amount of fraud that they're participating in? Yes. Are they propping up the Democratic Party and like financing a vast array of scumbags with this? Yes. But the Indians are in the same fashion doing the same sorts of things, right? And like there's a lot of people posting about this as well. And they're also a very small, frankly, they are a small percentage of our population. And so it's really interesting to watch these things play out and the defensive actions taking place online. But I certainly like the Somalis have their TPS status coming up in the spring, I believe, for renewal, and so it would be very easy to get rid of them because there's only like 60,000. It'd be very easy to do it, and especially the administration is saying anyone involved in fraud, and it's like, oh, that's basically all Somalians because they don't do this as individuals; they do it as like tribal groups. You don't decide to do it. You're set up in a house with help from someone in an NGO, and then your next level up tribal contact, whether it's a family member, a distant relative, or whatever, is like, here you go, you do this thing, and then you get a cut, and we control your LLC, and then everything directs this way, and you just live in this house and take care of your retarded grandparents. And so it's gonna be one of those things that's an easy low hanging fruit thing to address. Now the amusing thing happens, or I should say, the amusing outcome would be uh, they fail to actually deal with that, or there's massive resistance when it's time to get rid of these people, which would be a complete. It'd be putting them on the spot. It'd be putting the admin and just the legitimacy of our government on the spot. That like literally the second people get in and they have some sort of status, you can't get rid of them. That will be really interesting. And so the whole thing with DHS is that they were establishing kind of a separate armed security force with law enforcement credentials within the United States that's controlled by their faction. And so this is a group that can actually do things. So this is where things get spicy. It's this year in the spring, watching how this plays out. This could get very spicy.
Well, and I think that that is the big takeaway from Doge. It's just that literally everything is funded by the US government.
Yeah.
Like the whole reason all of these, kind of like synthetic, progressive protests exist here, exist across the world, all of these different things, and many of these sort of got memed on by Doge, paying for, sex reassignment surgery in Nigeria, all of these kind of preposterous things. And it's like, oh, well, it's just patronage, right? You're just paying your guys to basically do nothing to make the world worse with billions of dollars from normal middle class Americans. And when you combine that with the revelations about this kind of like widespread fraud, as we've said with the Somalis, it's basically like, okay, this is just a looting operation. There's really nothing more to it. And we knew that, we just didn't know the details. There's been some information going around basically breaking down, population by different demographic group and tax contributions.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Karl, people like you and I fund about 80% of this.
Yeah.
Obviously other groups as well, but dramatically overrepresented in that. And effectively, as we've seen, laws really only apply, like fraud is really only illegal if you're a white guy, to be perfectly honest. And if you're a client group, that's just what you do.
Yep.
And really, the main problem, as we know from Tim Walz, is looking into it. That's white supremacy. And again, you look at, and Somalis are a particularly poignant example because it's like, one, literally the last time I thought about Somalis, it's because they were, killing American soldiers and dragging their bodies through the streets. Somehow they end up here in, Minnesota and northern Maine, and then start these massive fraud networks. And it's like, okay, like, why are we doing this? Literally, why are we doing this? What benefit does this have to us? When there is none, right? To the nation per se. But, and this is funny because Somalians were the exact example used in Spandrel's Bioleninism essay.
Yes.
It's because they are incompetent fraudsters. And that's
Yes.
great as
Yep.
a client group. That's exactly what they are here for. One, it's been, allegations relating to Act Blue, that all of these different daycare centers and
Yep.
health companies with no addresses or multiple registered at the same boarded up building, well, they're kicking up maximum contributions to Act Blue. And look, like the Republicans have been so entirely incompetent, and that's really been kind of the kind of trend line of 2025 has just been complete and total incompetence. And well, we found this, horrendous fraud, all of these, billions wasted, these people stealing, these people committing crimes. So we'll send a strongly worded letter. Okay. Like that doesn't stop this. That doesn't actually do anything. And, yeah, it's basically a giant scam. Like we knew it. Now we know more. And look, like that's not a good position to be in, because it seems as if there was a chance to actually do something, and it was completely and totally, reabsorbed, right? The blob won. And so, there's kind of been multiple chapters to this. This isn't on this infographic, which I might just pull down because there's more interesting stuff to talk to. But similarly, another big story this year, which is very much connected, has been the conversation around trucking. Right, there have been a number of really horrific crashes, where people have been killed, and we find out that basically there is a very similar scam set up for CDLs. On one hand, deliberately keeping labor low, deliberately basically getting slave labor, under training them, and many of these schools are being paid by the federal government to offer vocational training. So again, it's another one of these just kind of massive scams. Like an inferior product is being, purchased for a, upmarket rate. And we see it everywhere. I'll throw it back to you, Karl.
No, it's when my son was doing driver's ed, I couldn't help but notice the steady stream of Indians. I'm trying not to use a pejorative. Getting standard driver's licenses and then making the jump to get a provisional CDL. And many states were just handing them driver's licenses, just like bam. And one of them killed my cousin a year ago, who was a professional trucker. And so anyway, I'm trying to be as non-inflammatory as possible, but they are our biggest enemy race, in my opinion, in terms of the rubber meeting the road. In the real life space, lawfully, legally, peacefully, of course, but we can deal with this administratively. But in general, that's the big one when it comes to the upcoming problems for our people in the next couple of years. Is the Indians are basically the janissaries, the most effective janissaries, and still not very effective. It's just they're incredibly aggressive and abrasive about the way they do things, and incredibly hated. So the Somalian scapegoat, the way this works, that people forget about, is that uh, failure upon failure upon failure does not ultimately lead to like real resistance. Like, just look at South Africa. It doesn't work that way. um, it's very demoralizing to fail and lose on a regular basis. However, uh, if you see wins, people want more wins and they get more aggressive, and they demand more. They demand bigger wins. So if you see, this is that whole dancing on the edge of the blade of a knife thing that the regime has to do. They really need to re-legitimize themselves, and I think we all know, like everyone knows at this point, like what's going on. Like, your normal like Trump voter, which is not a normal voter, I get it, but it's like your normal Trump voter understands what's going on, and that's frankly catastrophic for the legitimacy of the regime. But it's over. So they have to give us wins, but they can't give us too many wins, because you can't control the momentum. And so when you see people, for example, here's the latest that's out there as it relates to the Somalians. Somaliland is a separatist region of Somalia that was administered by the British, and they have been trying to be recognized as a separate country from Somalia for quite a long time. They provisionally merged with Somalia in, I want to say it was the 60s after independence, but then they tried to break off again. And they had a war, and so they're unrecognized, and they're participating in like the negotiations around the Gulf with the Gulf states. They want to join the Abraham Accords. They've offered to receive Palestinian refugees and allow Israel to build a military base on the Gulf of Aden, right across from Yemen, right? Supposedly, right? This is supposedly this thing. And yes, there's been a lot of lobbying for decades about this, but now you have all these people saying, oh, well, if we get rid of the Somalians, it's all for Israel. And it's like, no, 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 no. We don't want Somalians here. That when I will never forget, this is a true story. I was traveling with a colleague who was a gay libtard, of course. Like literally, all those things are true. And we were in a city that has a very large Somalian population in America. There's not that many. And we had to get an Uber to go from a hotel to our clients' offices. And we got picked up by a Somalian, and I knew he was a Somalian the second I saw him. And I said, well, this will be interesting if I make it. So I texted my wife, I love you. Anyway, we're driving on the highway, and he's leaning over, like with his head resting against like the door and the side window, right? And so he can basically see over the steering wheel with his right eye, and he has his phone down there, and he's watching pornography and doing 80 miles an hour on the shoulder of the highway. And so my gay libtard colleague, who's up in the shotgun seat, is like, excuse me, sir, excuse me. And I'm just in the back, like, this is delightful, just like holding on for dear life. And nobody likes these people, and it isn't a big win for Israel if we get rid of them. Like, okay, if I don't care where they go, they can go into the sea for all I care. And if Israel has a separate thing with Somaliland, like where they do this thing, and it goes back 100 years. Like, we know, like, this was part of one of their alternate plans for settling, for being like baby Israel. Don't gonna try and for people to smush these things together and say you can't get rid of the Somalis because of Israeli machinations in Somaliland. I'm just like, you're a retarded person. You've lost the ability to perceive the world.
Well, this is something, and this has been more recent. We have seen, and look, Carl, you and I are aware of certain realities of American foreign policy, which almost don't even need to be said. Now that said, uh, there is like a genuine, we could call it like IDS, right? Israeli derangement syndrome.
Yes, absolutely.
And you see this with the kind of like desire to create some sort of like coalition with like Muslims, where it's like, oh, like, the base Muslims, they like Jesus. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, sure, in like an abstract sense, but also they do not belong here, right? Like, we don't want them here. And, allying with Islam to I have to pick my terms here, to own the Israelis is like, look, man, you're kind of taking in a poison pill here. Like, both things can be bad. I think you see this perhaps more in America than in Europe for obvious reasons. Like, for us, there's proportionally a much smaller amount of, you know, uh, immigration from majority Muslim nations. But you even see it from guys like Tucker, who generally I quite like, but like those sort of comments I just find baffling. Like, why are we doing this? Two things can be bad at once, even if they don't like each other. It's sort of the like, girls, girls, you're both horrible sort of thing. Uh, and that's one of those things where it's just I refuse to be pulled into that false dialectic. It's
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah.
we lived in a country where neither of these were a concern, and it was very nice then. I would like to do that again. Uh, Other kind of stories over the year that I think are worth mentioning is the eternal saga of one. Actually, this was the year that that Bog Beef coined the term Star Wars name, which is a great term, just as a
Absolutely,
catch-all.
absolutely.
But the eternal kind of multi-chapter saga of Kilmar Albrego Garcia, right? This sort of you know, wife beating, gang member who's become, much, like a pit bull or something, a sort of
Yeah.
like cause celeb of, the American libtard. I think he's still in the country. I can't tell. Uh, Again, we've just found out that much like the entire government being a scam, uh, judges just rule America. There's nothing to it. It's like you can win an election and then some guy in like, Minneapolis just says, well, I went to law school, so that doesn't happen. I am now
Yeah.
the president of America. And again, while we have seen many strongly worded letters, there has been absolutely no progress on that. I think one lady got a felony because she literally let someone out of her courtroom and told them to run. Okay, that's something. But that is also so cartoonishly illegal that it's sort of
Yeah.
like that's not a huge win. Whereas the kind of activist judges, I mean, this has been a problem since FDR, right? Legislating from the judicial bench, but it is metastasized, and in much the same way that the kind of administrative state has metastasized, you cannot have a country with this sort of ruling. It is completely and totally like ossified. This is nonsense, and the unwillingness to attack this, especially staring down, at in the most realistic case, maybe one more year in power. It's like, okay, guys, like, what are we doing here? Because the answer seems to be, okay, like we're solving some aspects of the border, good. We're, you know, going about deportations in a inefficient way, but it's happening, which is, something, and then nothing else whatsoever. And so, like, the idea that, I owe this coalition some sort of loyalty after this just like complete and total inability to get anything done. Let alone we talk about, the appointments or anything else. It's like, look, guys, like, aren't you in charge? Like, aren't
Yeah.
you the president? Because one of the other stories that happened a little bit earlier, or maybe it was somewhat contemporaneous with the first round of Mr. Borrego Garcia, was the whole auto pen scandal, which is
Yeah.
big in like deep MAGA area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but that is sort of an interesting one because it just turns out that what we all knew to be true was true, that Joe Biden was just a senile old man or a Chinese clone. Uh, and he was just having a robot sign a bunch of stuff that he didn't understand and didn't read. And apparently that's how the biggest, most powerful country in America, or in the world rather, works. Like this world empire, it's just an autonomous system. Again, I don't know what to add to that as a conclusion, but that's neat to know.
Yeah. It's delightful. All they have, really all they have to do is build up uh enough people dispersed around the country, in orgs they control, which again, yes, I get it. To have an all patriots go moment and basically say it'll be all good at the end of this, like disregard judges. I'll leave it at that. But I mean, it's literally at that point where that's the only thing that could work. And the people, waiting with bated breath for that to happen, are probably going to be disappointed because you're not dealing with serious people, and the serious people uh, are basically shackled by unserious leaders. So it's very interesting. This is going to be a fascinating year, and I'm here for it. I am here for it. I'm not going to be sad about it. I like again, like I get it. So why would I sit there and cry about it? Like you have to put that behind you. You have to have accepted this by now instead of just being a sad panda. It's the days of being sad about the stuff are over. You need to have this bemused Jay Burden-esque perspective on the subject.
Uh, yeah, I think that everyone should have a Jay Burden-esque perspective on everything.
That's
It's really
true.
my whole
That's
project here.
true.
It's just, narcissism. But we did get a super chat from the Shadow Band over on Entropy.
Mm.
Happy New Year. Thank you, Shadow Band. I appreciate it. Happy
Thank you,
New Year.
Shadow Band.
Yeah, and I want to sort of temper all of this by saying, look, like, the Trump administration failing is not the end of the world here. I think that it shows that certain avenues to solving this have been closed off, which would have undoubtedly been pleasant and easier than others. But, you know, it was a long shot at best. Enjoy your 762. No comment. I'll leave that at that. Yeah. And I think that, really 2025 has been, a year where many things were laid out explicitly and made clear. Again, we knew that this thing was not for us. It viewed us
Yeah.
hostily. But it's a different thing to feel that and to see, the actual hard data. Is somewhat related. Obviously, the economy has been a disaster. This is sorry, the comments are quite funny on this. Uh
Oh.
the but anyway, sorry to kind of wrap up that thought, that as we kind of turn to the economy, and that and the inflation was a story that, in that graph I showed earlier was, high all year. It's something people are very concerned about. But, whether you look at the piece from Compact or, the anti-boomer discourse that you and I have been engaging in, it's
Yeah.
another example where effectively this thing is not for us. And if you were neither, a current kind of, patron or client rather of, the patron class, you're getting screwed. And if you're not, you don't have access to, you know, ultra, boomer luxury communism, right? This, your boomer Gibbs, well, you're screwed too. And even if you do, as millennials would say, even if you do the thing, you get your guy in, you create this alternative power structure, you go about things in such a way as would, you know, someone serious about changing this, well, the system will simply, adapt around it. It will simply, absorb that. I think it's interesting as well to note that Trump had his highest approval, particularly under the under 40 crowd in the early months
Yeah.
when he was just battering these people, going after them, firing them, when he was, saying these people are going to jail. That's when he was, at his highest. And now, like, look, like I think the generic ballot is like D+1, which isn't crazy. It's not like they're, huge, massively underwater. It's still well within the kind of noise of polling. But at the same time, it's like, look, like as we just saw a few days ago in Iowa, it's like the Republican base is not excited. They're
No.
not happy because rightfully they realized that they were had, that they were sold a bill of goods and nothing came of it at all. And the real priorities are, look, like, the illegal immigration certainly part of it, although, the administration has been speedlining legal immigration, which is a distinction without a without a distinction
Different.
without a difference. Thank you. Uh, so okay, that's at best a mixed bag. But anything else, it's like, well, do you want another war? We can do that. Do you want to Operation Midnight Hammer? Do you want to, bomb Yemen? I guess. And look, like I'm not some peace stuff here. I'm not just offended by the concept of conflict. I don't really care about the fact that we're, blowing up Somali pirates or, in the Strait of Hormuz. I guess that's not Somalis, but, pirates. That doesn't bother me. That doesn't offend me. But when that's the one thing you're doing, especially after, presenting yourself as, a peacemaker, presenting yourself as someone who is getting us out of war, it's like, well, okay, like, to be honest, what are you doing for me? And the prospect of maybe kind of we might give you like 2 grand on a check that you're still taxed on if we feel like it, in the face of, an exploding cost of living, a trade war which is seemingly being lost. And again, I'm not some free marketeer. Like there's a way to do, tariffs that make sense, but it seems as if the Chinese had more leverage than we did and we're getting screwed. So where does that go? Like genuinely, where does that go? One of the other interesting trends that I thought was kind of fascinating is, I'm sure you remember, Karl, and from what I understand, this was much more pronounced in Europe than it was here. But the big thing after uh, after the coup was Ukraine. Like that
Yeah.
was current thing. That has really died down.
Oh yeah.
Zelensky had a big spike after that, admittedly very funny interaction between him and Donald Trump and JD Vance. That was the last, in my mind, the last sort of cool Trump moment. Even if it was kind of a farce, but that has just dropped off the face of the earth. People really aren't talking about it anymore. Now, part of that is that grim realities may have started to set in. Also, the kind of fickle American Marvel brain seems to have focused on something else. ICE is the big bugaboo now. I haven't figured out a connection between Putin and ICE, but I'm sure we'll find one. Uh, and I think that that's interesting as well. That it seems as if, while certainly the the operative part of the machine, the thing that really matters, is foreign policy. We are seeing a different camp in power, right? Who are more focused on certain interests at the expense of others. And it seems as if Israel, both, post, October 7th and also with the Israel-Iran war, has basically taken over as priority. And that needs to be our kind of like foreign policy priority over everything else. Uh, Operation Midnight Hammer was immensely embarrassing because it was basically, we were told to jump, we did sort of incident.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that
Humiliating.
conceptually there was something kind of interesting that happened, which is that Israel got battered a lot more than I think many people thought they would. I know that, neither you nor I is particularly like a Middle East foreign policy guy, but I'm curious if you have anything on that point, Karl.
They did very poorly, and their whole Iron Dome, uh, which is something that I demand regularly, uh, I performed very poorly. It's very effective against like aluminum tubes filled with like rocket powder, a giant
Oh, what
SD's
about a
engine.
Tesla driven by a suicidal Green Beret with the Desert Eagle?
Yeah, but no, they performed poorly, and it was a great moment to show that the unipolar world is over. Uh, you know, drone technology and cruise missile technology, hypersonics, hypersonic conventional weapons, uh, and multiple reentry conventional weapons have been showcased a great deal in both uh, Israel as well as Ukraine. And it's just really, really hilarious that, yeah, that's actually a good point, Paulie B. I mean, it was saturated and supplemented by all kinds of American missiles, anti-missile technology, and you can get through. You can get through with either saturation as well as like the right kind of weapons. So it was a very, very interesting demonstration. And I think, and again, like it's not, it's really important for the regime to be forced to confirm what it actually is, right? Like if you can, in the 80s and 90s, there was open debate about policy related to a certain country in the Middle East, many countries in the Middle East, but one in particular that, now nakedly runs the show and brazenly says that if you notice this, you're a racist. And by the way, your ancestors were horrible too, and it's in your genetics. And so everyone was like, oh my God, like you're a psychopath. Like normal conservatards are like, wow, this is really bad. And so I'm here for it. I'm enjoying that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the other, you know, major, and they're kind of sort of tied at the hip. Is on one hand, the, shall we say, changing public opinion on the nation of Israel. There was certainly a big move that happened after October 7th, but it seems as if that was predominantly on the left. That, this is where we saw, a lot of, anti Israel protest on college campuses, which incidentally were stomped out, right, in a very different way to,
Shocking.
BLM protests and others. A number of, and this might, I think this was 2024. But point is, there were a number of Ivy League and kind of near Ivy League university presidents who got, the hatchet for being complicit or not as strident as they could have been in taking these out. But it seems as if that sort of hit the left first, whereas with the right, it took a little bit longer. But that's been a dramatic transformation. I think perhaps one of the most significant of 2025 has been the shifting public opinion on the nation of Israel. I think that, watching the usual suspects react to, the war in Iran, however brief it was, that was interesting. That was revealing. And closely related, that has been the mainstreaming of, Nicholas Fuentes, who, isn't my thing. I don't listen to his stuff, but when I see him go on one of these shows, he's doing very well. And there are several things to learn there. One, he's a talented guy. He's good at what he does. Two, it's been interesting to see the cancel culture power of Con Inc. fail, largely just due to how undisciplined their own people are.
Yeah.
You have guys like Steven Crowder, who I have nothing good to say. I have nothing good to say about him. He, denounces Fuentes one day, and then once he sees the numbers, he's like, oh, well,
Shocking.
he's got to come on my show. Uh, the, you know, and even then, the insane reaction to all of this from, figures like Levin, people like Shapiro, people like Barry Weiss, which that's sort of an interesting story that hasn't been quite as big in our circles, has been Barry Weiss, taking over. Is it ABC and I can't remember, one of the, the alphabet soup networks. And it's been interesting. And I mentioned this, I don't remember if this is an article I published or not. It will come out at some point, but talking about how, the desire for a kind of conservative purge is there. It is unlikely they will be able to accomplish it due to any number of reasons. But one of them I thought was particularly interesting is when, Barry Weiss, who is, this conservative Jewish lesbian who worked at the New York Times,
Very
you know,
conservative.
yeah, worked at the Free Press. She was talking about her role. And she says that my role is to define the acceptable 40 yards of discourse.
Yep.
Sort of a, Overton window-esque remark. And yes, Barry Weiss is in fact related to Barry White. Her voice is not quite as good, but if you listen to it really closely, you can hear it. But in all seriousness, right, she's talking about how we need to get rid of, these unacceptable figures like Tucker, like Nick Fuentes, like Hassan Piker, so not entirely wrong, and replace them with these sort of high-minded conservative luminaries like Alan Dershowitz. Okay, look, man, I don't know how to break this to you, but Alan Dershowitz is not what we would call a huge draw, uh, especially after Epstein. The specter of the Epstein scandal has continued to hang over USG.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Trump and Pam Bondi have managed this extraordinarily poorly. And in addition to Trump, repeatedly saying that affordability is a Democrat hoax, he has made similar comments about Epstein. As we've said before, the kind of podcast bro conspiracy circuit was, they swung for Trump, right? He went on, those shows, and that's not, as the kids say, it's not a good look. It's not doing him any favors. And, the immense amount of gaslighting on this has been really frustrating. Many people, again, feeling frustrated and disheartened. Dershowitz, if you may remember, in addition to being weird and 80 years old and not particularly charismatic, is a well-known massage connoisseur. But I
Yes.
believe, he says, I kept my underwear on so it wasn't weird. Odd claim. I can't really imagine being on a private jet and getting a massage from a, suspiciously underage girl. Like, that seems like a weird thing. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, let alone, uh, I don't know. It's sort of odd, but point is, Barry Weiss thinks this is sort of important person we need to be, inserting into the discourse at the expense of, everyone else. And I think that really, that sort of purge is, I can't quite tell if they're trying it now unsuccessfully or if they are building up to something bigger. The story at Heritage was kind of interesting, Karl. You and I spoke about that not too long ago.
Mhm.
But, this was part of this purge where, a guy was fired for defending Tucker Carlson's right to talk to someone on a podcast he produces on his own property, on his own network. He got outed. They went through that entire org and basically, found people who were unwilling to go to Jewish religious dinners because of their religion and, accused them of anti-Semitism. Certain figures who were sort of leading this charge. It's kind of interesting. We're seeing sort of a push from both, the nominal right and nominal left. You have figures like David French, read my article about him on Substack, basically
Congratulations,
saying
by the
like,
way.
thank you. I was here for a little bit of context, guys. When we were on Pete's show, Karl was giving me some writing advice, which was basically stop being a weenie, just put it out. And I've been laboring over this article for 2 weeks, and I couldn't get it how I wanted it, and so I basically put it out like 12 hours later after Karl yelled at me. So point is, very helpful. Uh,
I don't think I yelled at you. I
no,
encouraged
no, you
you.
didn't.
That's
But
funny.
in all seriousness, right, you have him going after what he calls the new right. You have James Lindsay going after the so-called woke right. You have this push from, the more kind of explicitly, and I wouldn't say more explicitly Zionist, but the Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin types, all saying we need to get rid of these people. And I think that really, like, this is going to be, the defining the defining fight in 2026. We've already seen it a lot this year. I mean, really, as soon as Trump was, won the election, there was an instant scramble uh, to claim credit for it and an instant desire to say we need to purge these people. It's sort of a rerun of what we saw in the 80s and 90s with the paleocons and neocons. But again, the problem is who who is the base for these people, right? Where do they derive their support from? Well, sure, they have Miriam Adelson, who, interestingly enough, Trump has mentioned by name many more times than talking about, homeowners under the age of 40. And as you may be aware, Karl, there are more people under age 40 trying to buy a house than there are Miriam Adelsons by a relatively significant
Mm-hmm.
margin. But again, like, where do you go? Because effectively, there are mounting problems. These problems are being cast as either Democrat hoaxes or simply ignored. The left is hyping itself up for violence. Obviously, we haven't even mentioned, uh, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which I will say I have become just morally repulsed by the way people are sort of using him as a moral justification. Like if you at all see kind of big conservative media, it is this kind of repeated motif of here's something I think. Charlie Kirk said this to me in a phone call one time.
Yeah.
Just like using him as like a trump card. It's kind of ghastly. The bizarre situation with his wife that I will not get into. I think it's sort of distasteful, but it is bizarre nonetheless.
Yes,
Uh,
agreed.
and then also you have someone I dislike enough. I very rarely mention them, Candace Owens, who I don't know if she is just actually mentally capable of complex thought. I'll leave it at that. Or if she's simply, grifting, right, creating a big stink on social media.
Yes.
But she is slotted into another part of this attempted purge, which is
Slotted.
also the desire to get rid of kind of conspiracy theorists. Her and that guy Ian Carroll kind of function as the sort of like low IQ conspiratards.
But
Uh,
but they're being promoted, notice. That the
yes,
lowest IQ takes, the most transparent nonsense is what is being promoted. This is a standard tactic. Sorry.
right. Yeah, no, 100%. It
Just
is.
because she
It
took the
is.
bone out of her nose doesn't mean that she's like a genius all of a sudden. Like people forget this. They're like, I don't see a bone in the nose. So like I must be dealing, and her hair's straight and like she's wearing Western clothing.
No comment. Uh, no, it is sort of like the loose change strategy all over again,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Where it's basically like, oh, hey, let's take some transparently retarded idea on an a controversial or inexplicable event, and that will be the B side, right? That will be your alternative position
Yeah.
because it is easy to dismiss. It's transparently stupid. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think that sort of fight is going to be very interesting. Have our friend Stormy talking about, how our true enemy is the conservative. There's something to that. I think that there's also, a lot of auditioning for new roles as sort of gatekeepers, right? People trying to play pretend as if they're William Buckley so that they can, get into that role. I think you're getting that from Corky, as well as a few others like Barry Weiss. Uh, yeah, it's sort of an interesting ongoing story. I'm perhaps more interested in it than most, but I see that continuing to develop at the same rate that we're seeing increased political violence. Uh, I think that, the economic stuff, excuse me, I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm not the person to talk about that, but the economy is going very badly. If
Oh
you
yeah.
have done something as simple as buy groceries, you're aware of that fact. So really, I mean, look, the tenor has changed remarkably over the last year. The sort of jubilance, the sort of we are going to kill you memes, all that kind of stuff has really
Some
decreased.
things
People are
still apply. It's just the timeline is a thing. Oh, I was talking
yes,
about something different.
but point is, right, that sort of like jubilant, like in your face tone has really dropped, and many people are feeling disheartened. They're feeling like, hey, we got sold a bad bill of goods. Now that said, There are things which are would have been inconceivable a year, let alone 5 years ago, that have become common features in discourse. About uh, our relation to certain foreign nations, all of that stuff. And so ultimately, I think that is positive. And I think that, we're already seeing a situation uh, in the UK where a political party is crumbling, where it is falling apart. And at this point, to be honest, I think that's the best thing that could happen to the Republican Party is it needs to die.
Exactly.
It is a collection of losers wedded to their kind of subordinate position in the state. And if something's going to change, and something needs, something
It is
needs to.
certainly going to change, and it must. Yes.
So anyway, yeah, that's it's sort of my scattered thoughts on the year. Other sort of major stories that don't, slot into the sort of narratives we mentioned before. Obviously, you had the canceling and then uncanceling of Jimmy Kimmel. That was sort
Yes.
of pathetic and lame. No Kings has, been around for a little bit. That's just really gay. Uh, we had the government shutdown snap saga, which was another sort of reveal that, again, this entire system is a massive scam, and the Republicans are completely ineffectual to do anything about that. Uh, Many such cases, as a guy once said. Uh, Zoran Mamdani, that's a big story in kind of Con Inc. circles that, there's a jihadist socialist running New York. Uh, as I predicted, he's not. I mean, I'm sorry, he's just not. He's come into office and he's basically just another progressive. He's a progressive that is more palatable to millennials, more palatable to new arrivals, but same thing. Not a good guy. I don't like him. Not my friend. But the outrage around him is sort of performative, and it's particularly interesting how much uh, old New York Ukrainian money, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, went
Yes.
into preventing him from winning and didn't work. Now, look, again, as we said earlier, when criticizing Tucker about his attitude towards Muslims, that doesn't mean Mr. Star Wars Mayor is our friend. Far from it. But what it does mean is, again, these people are not omnipotent. They can lose. And, there's I think it's a German folk story, right, about the golem, the monster created that, eventually turns on its creator, sort of a,
Yes.
Frankenstein
German.
situation. Yeah, German, I think, Alsatian, one might say. Uh, but that is something that is entirely possible. We saw a similar thing happen with the deeply embarrassing mayor of Minneapolis. Is it Jacob Frey is his first name, I believe? Uh, where he narrowly skated over a Somali interest candidate within the Democratic primary. Uh, he was able to do that, but it was a near run thing. And that Somali candidate, again, not our friend, but would govern in a very different way than Jacob Frey. I think that in much the same way that we're starting to see tensions in the UK between, progressive parties and their client groups, because, sure, they will vote with communists, but they have very different priorities. Obviously, they're not up for the gay stuff. They're very much up for the Gibbs. I think that is a fracture we are likely to see here as well. I mean, look, like the UK is in a situation where both major political parties are basically collapsing. Uh, Many differences between their system of governments and ours, but an interesting moment. And I think that that is another trend we are likely to see. Uh, yeah, the Freikorps was victorious.
Yes.
Uh, anyway, as far as other ones, just kind of wrapping this up, 6-7, that's a pretty big deal. I don't
I don't
understand
even
it.
know what that is.
Me either. I think your
I
kids are
have kids of
probably the
the
right age.
I have kids of the right age. I can go ask them, but like my son just rolls his eyes because he hates all trends. He's very edgy like me. My
I don't know,
daughter,
man.
you
I
know,
feel like 2025 is the year I became old, where
yeah.
it was well and fully like I don't understand things. It's they're new and they're scary, and one day it'll happen to you. Well, it's finally happened to me. The point is now culture, the West is fallen, is what I'm saying. Now that I no longer understand things. Uh, and then really, the others we've talked about the the political violence. Marjorie Taylor Greene has decided to step down, which is sort of interesting. I don't like her. I don't think she's smart generally, but I think this might actually be a good move for her if she is looking ahead towards a massive Republican bloodbath,
Yeah.
which will be blamed on the quote unquote woke right, will be blamed on the conspiracy theorist, will be blamed on not on being too radical, on not supporting, the Alsatians to the required degree. Well, quite simply, if those people aren't there, if they've been out of power for 2 years, you can't blame them. It's an interesting move. We'll see how it works out for them. But I think that the purge will intensify, or at least their attempts at one, as situations get worse for their party, as the amount of defeats in off-year elections mount, especially after the midterms. That will be the discussion. The discussion will be, we got too radical, we became woke, we need to tack to the center, we need another Mitt Romney. Because look, Trump isn't around too long, and say what you will about JD Vance, but they don't like him. They want him out. We didn't mention Signalgate, but it's particularly interesting that that whole cluster, right, where some guy accidentally added, an Atlantic journalist to a group chat on accident and was able
Oopsies.
to leak a bunch of information. Who was it targeted at? A JD Vance and Pete Hegseth. Again, guys I don't like. But if you look at this conversation about the woke right, the line goes, well, the kids are woke. They're Nazis. So you need to purge them out of every institution. You need to purge them out of the young Republicans, as we saw earlier in the year. You need to cut them off. You need to purge heritage. You need to get rid of them. Why are they bad? Well, Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes connects to Tucker. He's another problem. We need to get rid of Tucker, who is Tucker's best friend, according to this, J.D. Vance. So that is the woke right infiltration of the Republican Party. We've already seen them being blamed for everything. And to me, that seems logical. Again, we understand here you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Does not mean J.D. Vance is our best friend, but I do think it is interesting how much a certain segment of the regime truly hates him. And again, I have my criticisms of him. It doesn't even need to be said. I have, multiple things about him that I do not prefer, I do not like. But I think that that is effectively the locus of this disagreement. Because again, right, Trump is soon to be out of politics one way or another. He is an old man. He isn't going to be around forever. And the question is, well, what becomes of MAGA after Trump? Does it fully, return to, the Romney Reich forever? Or, is there some sort of successor? Trump is giving the nod to Vance, but also it's interesting how much he talks about Marco Rubio, who is connected to Susie Wiles, who's basically a full-on swamp creature, like
Yeah.
neocon.
Florida man.
And that's interesting as well, right? Because it's always Trump saying, well, we'll do both. It'll be a Vance Rubio ticket, but I'd be shocked if there weren't people trying to angle for Rubio, no Vance. So that I think will be an interesting dynamic as well. Like, when does the official jockeying for, the replacement to Trump start? I mean, I think it's already started. It's just not explicit per se. But yeah, that's sort of my year in review, year in wrap up, and trends that I have sort of predicting into the future. So, Karl, is there anything I've missed? Anything you think is going to be relevant in the upcoming year?
I think the only thing that we can say based on all of this is that the most important thing here, kind of like Doge was a parallel institution controlled by a faction of the Trump people and Trump allies who wanted to actually make it happen. And you must have your own parallel institutions. Burden and I are associated with the OGC, the Old Glory Club. You need to know people IRL in your area who you can network with that plugs you into a national network as well, to kind of do your own thing. And this is like doing business with each other, buying meat from a guy in your crew or his cousin, taking your car to one of your guys' auto shops, keeping your money in the same pool, helping each other start businesses, supporting each other's small businesses, because we're on our own. Like, no one's going to save us. The one of the things that I think is actually promising about not only the Trump administration but the shift that has taken place is that uh, is power generation in America, which is incredibly important. Like we've stymied ourselves by having incredibly yes, kissing each other goodnight. We've stymied ourselves by having incredibly expensive electricity because of gay retard stuff. Production of nuclear power is incredibly important so that we can drive costs down of materials, so that the reshoring, which is happening no matter what, just because of the nature of what's going on in the world, the reshoring of production to America is completely dependent upon affordable electricity, because that's the only variable that uh, combines with high American wages to keep prices down is cheap electricity. It's as simple as that, it's a compounding situation. There's been some very good material on the topic over the past couple months from people, and I think that's probably the most important thing that's going to happen. Do I think that we're going to get that? Yes, I think we're going to get that in a lot of American states, but not all of them. Like in some even some libtard states, but mostly more like red states. Our red states, is the leadership of red states gay and retarded? Yes. Yes. Those that they are the GOPE, but they also understand the importance of power and having an actual economy for people. Are they very compliant and complicit when it comes to, mass migration? Yes. Um, is that going to be a challenge? Yes. But cheap power is incredibly important. I think it's going to happen. I mean, I on 85% chance that we're going to see a massive decrease in power. They have to do it. Like the biggest thing that I came away with after October 7th was they have to put power back in our hands, or at least get us to buy back in, for any of this to have a chance. Are they going to try to split out with other people? Yes. Are they going to try to pivot and expand Israeli influence in South America and Africa and other places? Yes. They got blocked out of China. Their plan was to like milk us, do the bust out operation here and in Europe, and then move on to China. They failed at that. They had to pivot. They need us, and they also don't want to live in Israel. A commenter pointed out that when the rockets of peace started cascading down upon Israel, they would not let people leave the country because everyone who could leave left, because of Gaza, and because of the missiles to study and relax to. And so it's this push pull that is taking place that we're going to see play out. They have to do some level of empowerment, and the only way to get our buy-in is to engage in that empowerment, which is why you're seeing a lot of the shift in things that they're willing to talk about. And we still have lots of opportunity to share things. All the Somali fraud stuff. This goes back 13, 14 years, it being exposed on the news all the time and nothing was happening because of the government and controlling the narrative there. And now we have people that like, we have to stop this because we're going fucking broke because of it. We can't give Israel money if we're giving it to bulb heads, so to do nothing. And so it'll be incredibly interesting to see how all this stuff plays out, because they have to empower us, and they don't want to, but they have to. And so this is where the rubber hits the road. This is why I can't be blackpilled, because it's just the way it is. You can't have a World War II ramp up. Like everyone's been like, oh, they just want to get Whitey back on the reservation. back on the plantation so that we can have another big war. They can't do that. As Thomas points out, Thomas was pointing out when we recorded the latest Inquisition like 2 nights ago that it's over. They can't do that anymore. But you need weapons, you need power generation, yada yada yada. It's nuclear power, poor man. It's only nuclear power. All of the moving of the needle is in the nuclear power space, and because you need that for data centers, you need that as an alternative to the natural gas model. Natural gas doesn't produce enough power. You need it for the upscaling of the power grid, for frankly, a transition to EV and a lot of those technologies, which is still going. Yes, they rolled back a lot of the restrictions on internal combustion engines for the near future, but they need both. And so this is a balancing act that they have to attempt to maintain, and that requires empowering us. And they're petrified of doing it, and they hate it. It's the last thing they want to do is to treat us like human beings, but they have to do it, and that's what's playing out here. And the nice thing is enough people are starting. It's over. Like the next generations, all these people who are like, well, I'm a boomer or a senior Gen Xer, and all I've seen is us lose, and so we have to have a losing mentality of going underground. It's like, no, that is over. Like the noticing will continue. Our mutual friend Astral points out that like on Instagram, everything is there's grug versions of all of our talking points all over Instagram, and that's almost all that you see. And they just can't counter it. They can counter it by having paid influencers and advertising campaigns that everyone then makes fun of. So it's over for them. It just takes a lot of time for this stuff to play out. Does that mean that it's always going to be wonderful for us? No, we are going into some very, very tough times. Don't get me wrong. We're going into some tough times, but it will be incredibly interesting.
I think that you're right about that. And on the point of being interesting, it sort of feels like we're at the end of an era. You know,
Yeah.
that the house that FDR built is coming apart one way or another. And the Nuremberg regime is coming apart one way or another. And that is no inclination of what will come next. But you got to admit, it's kind of exciting.
It's very exciting.
Karl, I'm about to lose my voice. I was up too late last night, ringing in the new year. But where can people find you, man?
Best place for my effort posts and my podcast appearances is on my Substack, karldahl.substack.com, to show my marketing genius and the fact that I have my finger on the pulse of my audience. Last night, New Year's Eve at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, I posted a 10,500 word essay about Francisco Largo Caballero, teen heartthrob, that everyone was like on the edge of their seat to read this article, like outside the Largo Caballero themed New Year's Eve party that they were at. Jokes aside, it actually was received very well and had a really high hit and read count. So I was very happy about that. But anyway, yeah, I'm continuing to crank out original content there, doing podcasts. I've participated in 2 Inquisition sessions so far. I have a banger coming up with Astral Flight Simulation that comes out Monday that is talking about anarcho-tyranny and bio-Leninism. Sam Francis, our anarcho-tyranny article, and Spandrel's biological Leninism concept. and how that applies to the modern era, as well as findings from the Spanish Civil War from the nationalist psychiatrists on the topic. So incredibly interesting stuff. It's about 2 hours. It's a banger that'll be coming out, and then also, of course, on X, Caudillo Dahl, 2 books on Amazon, Faction and Faction with the Crusaders by book. Thank you, Mr. J. Burden. Happy New Year's to everybody. We are going to win eventually.
Happy New Year, Karl. And I noticed you forgot to mention the Google Drive with 36,000 photos of your feet.